Chairman, I request the recorded vote, please.
The gentlelady from California has requested a recorded vote that will be honored with the others. Thank you. The next one in line. Okay. The next amendment I see on the list is to be offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman. Mr. Grothman, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. I have an amendment, GROTWI 58 at the desk.
The gentleman from Wisconsin has an amendment at the desk. Clerk will report the amendment.
To the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee for an offer by Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin, identifier GROTWI_058.
The gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized, excuse me, wait a minute, gentleman from Kentucky
Reserve a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
reserves a point of order, and the gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 5 minutes on behalf of his amendment.
Thank you. First of all, I have a suggestion for my wonderful committee chair. And as we go through all the provisions of this amendment, I think it would be timely to someday have a separate hearing in which the congressman could have a variety of qualified speakers, and they could decide which things are the responsibility of the federal government, which things are responsibility of the state government, which things are the responsibility of the local government, and which things the government should never be involved in at all. Because I sense here something a little bit frustrating to me, and it seems like as this thing was putting together, there was no restraint, and the majority of congressmen on this committee thinks everything is the federal government's business. And it's a little bit concerning, but in any event, I think Mr. Takano kind of touched on things a little bit a while ago, but I would like someday to have that hearing. Now, as far as the amendment that I have, it deals with immigrants who are here inappropriately, and this bill changes things so that they would be able to receive Pell grants. First of all, we are broke. We are broke. There will be further amendments dealing about the inflation, but we are spending just so out of control. I think not since World War II we spent so much money. So we should always be highly questioning any provision of this bill which spends more money, and opening up Pell grants to people who aren't even here legally is certainly in that direction. Secondly, I've always had a little bit of problem with Pell grants in that the middle class does not receive them, right? You get a Pell grant if you have very low income. It's much more difficult, I think, to get a Pell grant if your parents are married or if you are married. And in this bill, we're going further down that direction. More money to people who are not married people with average income in this country, who are always taking it on the chin when this Congress acts. The other point I'd like to make about this provision is in July, we had, I believe, over 100,000 people here entering this country, staying in this country, who shouldn't be here. And one of the reasons why we have this is so much of the action of Congress and state and local governments kind of implied the United States does not enforce their immigration laws. Well, if we're going to change the laws and saying that you get Pell grants if you come here illegally, that certainly goes down the path of encouraging more illegal immigrants to come in this country. So in any event, in part because we're spending way too much money, in part because I think if anybody needs help paying for college today, it's your average middle class person, and in part because we're just overall broke, I introduced this amendment and hope everybody, also in the spirit of the fact that the federal government is doing way too much everywhere, I hope the amendment passes, and I was eloquent enough to pick up some of my good friends from the Democrat Party as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone seek recognition on this amendment? This gentleman from Texas seeking recognition.
Yes, I'll seek recognition.
Yes, the gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Chairman. For many years in this country, we have allowed people to live their lives in limbo to the tune of millions of people, including many people who are dreamers, what we call dreamers, many of those who have DACA. And these are folks who oftentimes were brought here as young kids that really had no choice whether to come to the United States, made no decision at all about that, but now find themselves in legal limbo. And this bill would help them so that their lives are no longer, or at least we've got to pass comprehensive immigration reform, but this bill would at least make it easier for them so that they're not forever stuck in that limbo and they can make their way through college and school and hopefully get into their careers. And so that's a positive thing for the United States. That helps unlock the potential, not only of those individuals, but also of the economies in which they reside. And those are really all 50 states across the country. And so this is a very important thing that we're doing. I know that, when you talk about immigration in the Congress, immigration is one of the most, if not the most controversial, one of the most controversial issues that we deal with as a Congress. And sometimes people tend to recoil when we debate it. But if you look at the fundamentals of this, again, this is something that's going to be beneficial not only for these individuals, many of whom made no decision at all to come to the United States, but also going to be beneficial to the country and to the universities and the cities and so forth. So with that, Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Does anyone else seek recognition?
Could I just respond to that for a second, Mr. Chair?
You've already spoken. Let me see if somebody on the minority side can get recognized to yield to you.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Gentlelady from North Carolina.
I believe Mr. Allen wants to yield. I'll let him do that.
Okay, I recognize Mr. Allen for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
yes, I just want to add, and then I'll yield, is that, we offer, I believe the number is almost 1 million student visas in this country every year for people all over the world. But anyway, I'll yield to my friend from Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'd just like to clarify, in this bill as currently before
And
us,
she didn't take it. Yeah, I
be
saw
a
it on the list.
25-year-old, you can cross into this country, and you are eligible for a benefit that the average middle-class American is not eligible for. The middle-class American will be told, go take out a loan, but the person who just came here illegally yesterday will be say, here's your Pell Grant. That's what this bill does, and I think people ought to be a little upset about that. But thank you.
The gentleman yields back to Mr. Allen.
Yes.
Mr. Allen yields back. Mr. Allen yields back.
Yes, sir. I yield back. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Does anyone else seek recognition? I see the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Yarmouth. Recognized for 5 minutes.
Move straight.
Gentleman's
Thank
recognized.
you,
for 5
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to comment on a few things that we've heard today, and my friend, Mr. Grothman, just talked about. He just said we're broke. I heard earlier that we're bankrupt. I heard earlier that we're piling debt on future generations. This is typical language from Republicans. None of it is true. We are not broke as a nation. We are not bankrupt. We can't go bankrupt. We absolutely cannot go bankrupt because we have the power to create as much money as we need to spend to serve the American people. We are not piling debt on future generations. We've been accruing debt in this country for 230 years. Not one person has ever been asked to pay that off. But we heard that when the national debt reached $1 billion under Abraham Lincoln. We've heard that when it reached $1 trillion under President Reagan, and we hear it constantly. But again, nobody's ever been asked to pay off $1 of the national debt. That's because that's not how things work. What we are doing now are piling incredible deficits on future generations in terms of a climate that is not going to be susceptible to their having a good life. We're piling on ancient school buildings that, most of the school buildings in my district were built 50 years ago or longer. What are we going to do? Leave future generations 100-year-old buildings and then expect them to learn? These are the types of things that when you're talking about what we're doing to future generations, we have to stop thinking about the money, which we can create plenty of, and the societal deficits, which we are accruing, that are going to make life very, very different for our grandchildren. And I have a 2-year-old that I'm very, very concerned about. So let's stop with all this crazy rhetoric about the nation going bankrupt. The United States will never go bankrupt. It can't go bankrupt. Let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about what we need to do to serve the American people, both today and in future generations. And I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Does anyone else seek recognition on the amendment? Does anyone else seek recognition on the amendment? If not, gentleman from Kentucky,
I withdraw my point of order.
the gentleman from Kentucky withdraws his point of order. The question now is on the Grothman amendment. All in favor of the amendment will vote aye.
Aye.
All opposed will vote no.
No.
Noes appear to have it.
Oh, I want a roll call on that, okay?
Okay,
Don't get mad at me.
and I'm not mad at you. Can't get mad at you. That request will be